I used to think relationships fell apart in loud, dramatic ways, screaming matches, slammed doors, ultimatums hurled across a room. But when mine began to crack, it happened quietly, almost politely. It's strange how something so gentle can still leave such a sharp mark. Lauren and I had been together for 2 years, long enough for our lives to feel woven together in all the small, everyday ways that make you believe you're building something lasting. She was the creative type, a graphic designer with a scattered desk but an eye for details I never noticed until she pointed them out. I worked in commercial real estate, a job with more spreadsheets than excitement, but it paid the bills and gave us stability, or so I thought. Until early February, everything felt steady, comfortable. We had our routines: brunch on Sundays, movie nights on Wednesdays, that worn-out lake house her parents owned where we'd spend lazy weekends cooking simple meals and pretending time didn't exist. I didn't realize how much I relied on those rituals until they started slipping away. The first sign was subtle. She began working late. I'd text her something casual, "How's your day going?" and hours would pass before she replied. She claimed she was buried in deadlines, client revisions, last-minute campaigns. I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to. You don't expect the person you trust most to suddenly become someone you can't read. Still, something felt different. There was a new kind of distance in her voice when we talked, like she was standing in another room even when she was sitting right beside me. At first, I tried to brush it off. Everyone goes through stressful months at work. But when I asked to see her, she always had a reason not to: exhausted, meeting with coworkers, plans she'd forgotten to mention. It wasn't like her to shut me out, and every time she did, it pushed a quiet worry deeper into my chest. I'll admit it, I handled it badly. I started texting more, trying to find times we could meet, tossing out suggestions for dinner or a walk or just a quick coffee. When she took too long to respond, I'd send another message. Not angry, just anxious, needing reassurance, needing something. Looking back now, I can see how that might have felt like pressure. At the time, it just felt like trying to hold on to someone who was slowly slipping out of my reach. The night everything changed, I showed up at her apartment with Thai takeout. It was her favorite, she'd once said. She could eat pad see ew every day for the rest of her life, and I hoped it might brighten her mood, or at least bring back a sense of normalcy. But when I walked into her place, she barely glanced up. Her eyes were locked on her laptop screen, light flickering across her face like she was miles away instead of sitting right there. "Can we talk?" she finally asked, closing the laptop with a soft but deliberate sound. My stomach tightened. Nobody ever asks that question when things are going well. "Sure," I said, though my voice had already gone tight. She took a breath, the kind you take when you're bracing yourself. "You've been a lot lately," she said. "The constant texting, wanting to meet all the time, asking where I am. I feel overwhelmed." The words hit harder than she probably meant them to. I wasn't angry, just startled, confused. "I just miss you," I said. "We haven't spent much time together recently." "That's because I need space," she replied, this time with more firmness. "So here's what's going to happen. From now on, I'll decide when we meet. I need you to stop pushing for plans. I'll reach out when I'm ready." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My mind kept looping the same thoughts. Relationships aren't supposed to work like this. Why am I suddenly the problem? What did I do wrong? I wanted to argue, to tell her it felt unfair, one-sided, like she was putting me on a shelf until she felt like taking me down again. But beneath the confusion, there was fear, the raw kind that whispers, "If you push back, she'll leave." So I swallowed everything I wanted to say and nodded. "Okay, I'll wait." Something eased in her shoulders, and she squeezed my hand gently, almost kindly, as if to thank me for accepting a punishment I hadn't known I'd earned. "I just need breathing room," she said. I tried to convince myself it was temporary. A phase, a rough patch, something couples work through. On the way home, I told myself I was doing the right thing, giving her space, being supportive, being patient. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid of losing her. The silence that followed was sharper than anything she had said. The first couple of days weren't unbearable. I threw myself into work, hit the gym more than usual, spent time with friends I'd unintentionally drifted from. But as the days stretched on, her absence grew louder. My phone stayed blank. She didn't call, didn't text. Not even a half-hearted meme she used to send in the middle of the afternoon just to make me smile. By day 5, I found myself replaying our last conversation over and over, wondering where things had truly begun to unravel. By day 10, I drafted dozens of messages I never sent, each one sounding more desperate or uncertain than the one before. By day 14, the waiting became a kind of dull ache, the kind that sits in your chest and refuses to move. I kept telling myself she'd reach out when she was ready, that this was what she asked for, that I just needed to be patient. I didn't know then how quickly everything would collapse, or how drastically my understanding of us was about to change. 14 days. It's strange how 2 weeks can feel like an entire season, like time stretches itself just to test you. I kept waiting for my phone to light up with her name, telling me she was ready to talk, ready to see me, ready for things to feel normal again. That message never came. On the evening of day 14, I got home later than usual. Work had been a blur not because I was busy, but because my mind was everywhere except where it needed to be. I loosened my tie the second I stepped inside, dropped my keys on the counter, and poured myself a drink I didn't really want. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the amber liquid, wondering when exactly everything had slipped out of my control. It was already dark outside. My apartment was quiet in a way that didn't feel peaceful anymore. The air felt heavy, like the silence had weight to it. Then I heard a soft, hesitant knock. I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a moment, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, just as quiet, almost unsure. When I opened the door, the last person I expected to see was standing on the other side. Lauren. Her eyes were red and glossy, like she'd been crying long before she reached my building. She was wearing jeans and an oversized sweater that looked like she'd thrown it on without thinking. Her hair was pulled back in a loose, messy way, nothing like how she usually styled it. In her hands, she held a small, white plastic bag from a pharmacy, crumpled from the way she was gripping it. "Can I come in?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. I stepped aside without knowing if it was the right thing to do. She walked past me slowly, like she wasn't sure her legs would carry her all the way. She set the bag on my kitchen counter and stood there with her arms wrapped around herself, trembling just a little. "What's going on?" I asked, quieter than I expected. Something in her posture scared me, not in a physical way, in a way that made me feel like the ground was shifting under my feet. She turned around. Tears streamed down her face before she could even speak. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, the world tilted. Not dramatically, just enough to make me reach for the counter to keep myself steady. My mind fumbled with the words. "What?" "I'm pregnant," she repeated, her voice cracking. "I took 3 tests. They were all positive. I should have felt something. Joy, fear, panic, relief, anything. But instead, I felt a cold confusion creeping up from the center of my chest. Pregnant. But we hadn't. "Lauren," I said slowly, carefully. We haven't been together in weeks." She closed her eyes, new tears slipping out. "I know." The silence that followed was so thick it felt like a physical wall between us. I opened my mouth, but the words caught. I didn't want to finish the question. I didn't want to hear the answer. But it hung there, heavy and unavoidable. "Then whose?" She covered her face with both hands and sobbed. Her whole body shook with it. When she finally managed to speak, her voice was thin and tangled with guilt. "His name is Troy. He's a photographer I work with. It only happened once, I swear. After a client meeting, we had drinks, and I don't know. I thought it was a mistake I could bury and move on from." She paused to wipe her cheeks, but more tears kept coming. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to tell anyone. I was trying to figure it out. Then I missed my period, and I panicked. I lifted my hand slightly, not touching her, just stopping her words. "Stop." My voice sounded strange, almost calm. Too calm. "Just stop." My thoughts were spinning so fast I couldn't grab hold of a single one. January. That was when she started working late. That was when she grew distant. That was when I started feeling her slipping away. The space she needed suddenly made a cruel kind of sense. "So the whole I need space thing," I said. "That was to keep me at a distance while you figured out what to do." She shook her head, suddenly frantic. "No, I mean, yes, partly. but I was confused. I was scared. I didn't know how to get out of the situation. "Get out," I said quietly. She blinked, confused. "What?" I walked to the front door and opened it. "Take your tests, take your explanation, take everything, and get out." Her eyes widened with panic. "Please, please just listen." "There's nothing left to listen to," I said, still holding the door. "You cheated. You lied. You made me believe I was the reason things were falling apart. You made me feel like I was being too much, when really you were trying to hide something, and now you show up with news like this." She stood there, shoulders shaking, tears streaming again. She picked up the pharmacy bag with trembling hands and walked toward me. She stopped in the doorway. Her voice was barely audible. "I'm sorry." I closed the door before she could say anything else. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch, the room dim except for the faint glow from the streetlights outside, replaying everything, every excuse, every distant look, every time she made me feel like I was imagining things. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, it hit me with a cold, bitter clarity. The version of our relationship I'd been clinging to didn't exist anymore. Maybe it never had. And the truth she dropped at my door wasn't the end of something. It was just the beginning of a fallout I hadn't even begun to understand. The morning after Lauren stood in my doorway with that pharmacy bag, I called in sick to work. I couldn't pretend to function, not after the emotional wreckage she left behind. I didn't sleep a minute, not even a second of accidental dozing on the couch. My thoughts kept looping back to the same moments. Her distance, her excuses, her sudden aversion to seeing me, everything felt like it had been rearranged in my memory, like the real story had been hiding under a false one I'd convinced myself to believe. I spent the first hour sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the cold cup of coffee I kept forgetting to drink. Eventually, something in me snapped, not in anger, but in a need for answers. I needed clarity, not from her, but from whatever scraps of truth I could piece together on my own. So, I did something I'm not proud of. I opened my laptop and went through every digital trace I could find, old texts, pictures, her social media posts, even archived conversations I'd forgotten existed. The deeper I dug, the more puzzle pieces I found that suddenly made sense. That's when I found him, Troy. I had never met him, but his profile was easy to find: a photographer with a carefully curated feed of moody portraits, grainy cityscapes, and artsy captions about capturing authentic emotion. It was the kind of page that would impress you if you didn't know what kind of person was behind it. But 2 weeks before Lauren showed up at my door, he'd posted a picture from an art gallery opening. At first, it looked like any other photo of his dim lights, people milling around, wine glasses in hand. But when I looked closer, my stomach knotted. Lauren was in the background, not front and center, not posed, but clearly there. Her posture relaxed, her smile faint but familiar. I zoomed in, even though I didn't want to see more. She looked comfortable, too comfortable for someone who claimed she needed space from me. The caption read, "Inspiring evening with inspiring people." I didn't know which part hit harder, the casual way he wrote it or the quiet fact that she'd been there with him instead of me. But what truly caught my attention wasn't the photo. It was a comment beneath it. A woman named Rachel had written, "Didn't know you were back on the scene. Thought you and Melissa were still figuring things out." Melissa? The name meant nothing to me at first, but something about that comment scratched at my brain. It sounded like the kind of thing someone wrote when they knew more than they meant to say. So I clicked through to her profile. Scrolling through her posts felt like snooping in a stranger's diary. Pictures of her and Troy together, but only up until late December. Vacations, dinners, goofy photos at home. Nothing suggested a breakup, just a sudden stop. No goodbye posts, no sad quotes, no vague announcements about moving on. Just silence. A silence I recognized, because I'd been swept into a version of it myself. My breathing tightened. Had Lauren known, or had she been told a story, just like I had been? I took screenshots of everything, the photos, the comments, the dates. Not because I wanted revenge, not because I planned to use them. I didn't know why I saved them, honestly. Maybe because I wanted proof that my instincts hadn't been wrong all along, that the distance I'd felt wasn't imaginary. 3 days later, Lauren texted me. She wanted to meet. She said we needed to talk about next steps. though I had no idea what next steps existed between two people who no longer had a relationship to stand on. Still, I agreed. Curiosity? Closure? Maybe just the need to hear her say everything out loud. We met at a coffee shop near my office. She looked exhausted, dark circles, hair pulled back without care, clothes chosen for comfort rather than presentation. For a split second, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the weight she'd placed on me, the confusion she'd allowed me to sit in alone. "I'm keeping it," she said the moment I sat down, as if she'd rehearsed the line over and over until it was the only thing she could say. I nodded slowly. "That's your decision. It's not what you want to hear," she continued. "But it's not my kid," I said, not harshly, just factually. She flinched like the words hit her physically. "I know, but you should know. Troy doesn't want to be involved. When I told him, he accused me of trying to trap him. He said he'd need a paternity test before he'd even consider. Smart guy," I muttered under my breath. She winced. I deserve that. There was a moment where she just sat there, staring at her cold coffee like she hoped it would give her some kind of answer she didn't have. "I know I destroyed everything between us," she said softly. "I'm not asking you to forgive me or take me back. I needed you to know the truth. All of it." "All of it?" I asked. "Are you sure?" She frowned. "What do you mean? Have you told Melissa?" The color drained from her face. "Who?" "Troy's girlfriend," I said. "Or ex-girlfriend. Hard to tell from his profile." She stared at me in stunned confusion. I didn't know he had a girlfriend." I pulled out my phone and slid it across the table. Photos of Troy and Melissa from January through December filled the screen. Her hand covered her mouth. "Oh my God." "Yeah," I said, standing. "Seems like the two of us were getting played in different ways." She didn't chase after me. She didn't call my name. She just sat there staring at the screen, quiet and shaken. I didn't feel triumphant as I walked out. I didn't feel vindicated. Mostly I felt numb. The truth wasn't clean or satisfying. It was messy, uncomfortable, and somehow more chaotic than the lies that came before it. But at least it was real. At least it was something solid to stand on, even if it was painful. And even then, I didn't realize the story wasn't done unraveling. The next twist was already on its way from someone I hadn't even met yet. Someone who knew Troy better than either of us did. 2 weeks passed after that coffee shop meeting, and I honestly thought I'd heard the last of anything connected to Lauren and Troy. I wasn't healed by any means, but the initial shock had settled into something quieter, like an old bruise you forget about until you bump into it again. I kept going to work. I kept going to the gym. I talked to friends more than usual, trying to fill the empty places Lauren had left behind. Life wasn't normal yet, but it was at least predictable. Then one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, avoiding sleep like I always did those days, I saw a message request on Instagram. I almost ignored it. Usually it was just spam or random promotions, but then I noticed the name. Melissa, Troy's girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend, or whatever she was to him now, after everything. For a long moment, I just stared at the notification. I had no idea how she found me. Maybe through that old comment I'd left on one of Troy's photos back when I didn't know anything. Maybe through Lauren. Maybe through her own suspicions. Whatever it was, she had tracked me down. Her message was short, almost formal. "Hi. I know this is strange, but I think we need to talk about Troy and your ex." There was something steady about the way she phrased it. No anger, no panic, no dramatic punctuation, just calm determination, almost like she had more answers than questions. I hesitated before replying. Part of me didn't want to get dragged any deeper into the mess. Another part, the part still bruised and curious, needed to know what she had discovered. We agreed to meet for drinks at a quiet bar downtown. I got there early and spent 10 minutes rehearsing what I'd say. But when Melissa walked in, everything I expected about her shifted. She wasn't fragile or timid. She wasn't teary or broken. She had a quiet intensity in the way she carried herself, like someone who'd seen enough in life to stop being surprised by people's disappointments. She sat down across from me, folding her coat neatly beside her. "Thank you for meeting me," she said. "I guess we both needed answers," I replied. She let out a small, humorless laugh. "You could say that." We ordered drinks, though neither of us seemed particularly interested in them. For a moment, We sat in silence, the kind that feels like two people standing at the same crime scene, trying to compare notes. Then she got right to it. "Troy called me the night before Lauren told you everything," she said. "He was panicking, said there'd been a mistake, that he'd made a terrible choice, and that it might have consequences." I raised an eyebrow. "Did he tell you she was pregnant?" "Yes, and he said it happened only once, after drinks, that she came on to him, and he was overwhelmed. All these excuses that didn't sound anything like accountability." I nodded slowly. "Lauren told me almost the same thing." "Figured," she said. "I've heard enough variations of that story to recognize the template." She didn't sound bitter, just tired. Then she continued. "He told me he needed space to think. Said he didn't want to lose me, but he had to figure things out." "That's interesting," I said, "because while he was asking you for space, he was telling her they were on a break." She sighed. "Classic. He always liked rewriting timelines." We spent the next hour comparing stories, the sudden distance, the late nights, the excuses that had seemed harmless at first but now looked suspiciously coordinated. The way both of us had been kept half in the dark, just enough to keep us attached, but not enough to see the full picture. At some point, we stopped talking about him and started talking about the strange experience of being deceived by someone you trusted. She spoke about the slow erosion of confidence, how easy it was to ignore small red flags, how exhausting it was to constantly rationalize someone else's choices. "It's like you keep giving them the benefit of the doubt until there's nothing left to give," she said, staring into her glass. I knew exactly what she meant. When our conversation shifted back to Troy, her expression hardened slightly. Not rage, not vindictiveness. Something quieter and more deliberate. "He has a big showcase next month," she said. "Gallery opening, investors, press, the whole thing." I nodded. "I saw something about that on his page." She curled her fingers around her glass. "I'm going to make sure everyone there knows what kind of person he really is." I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure what she meant. Revenge could take many shapes, some destructive, some symbolic, some simply honest. "What exactly are you planning?" I asked cautiously. She shrugged, but it wasn't a careless gesture. More like she was choosing her words carefully. "Nothing dramatic," she said. "I'm not going to shout or cause a scene, but I'm not going to let him charm investors while hiding the truth behind curated pictures and poetic captions. Not after what he put us through, not after what he put her through." "You mean Lauren?" I asked. She nodded. "She made a terrible choice, but he manipulated both of us, and he walked away without even acknowledging it. It wasn't about punishing him, it was about revealing him." I realized then that Melissa wasn't someone acting out of spite. She was someone who had been lied to long enough to decide she wouldn't stay silent. We talked a little longer, not about plans, but about closure, that elusive thing people keep promising will come as long as you wait long enough. She was blunt about it. "Closure isn't something people give you," she said. "It's something you take back for yourself." As we parted ways outside the bar, I asked her one last question. "So what will you do after the gallery thing? Move on?" She gave a small, cold smile. "I already have. This isn't for me. It's for the truth. Then I'm done." I watched her walk away, her shoulders steady, her pace confident. It struck me how strange life was, how someone I'd never met before all this could understand my situation better than nearly anyone else. I didn't know then how her plan would unfold, but I did know one thing. Troy's life was about to collide with reality in a way he couldn't filter or edit, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to clarity. 3 months have passed since the night Lauren appeared at my door with that pharmacy bag and a confession that detonated everything I thought I knew. Time didn't heal things neatly or quickly, but it did move forward whether I wanted it to or not. In the beginning, each day felt like walking across uneven ground, never sure where the next crack might be. But eventually, the ground steadied. Not perfectly, not all at once. Just enough for me to breathe without feeling like something heavy was sitting on my chest. I haven't spoken to Lauren since our coffee shop meeting. Not a call, not a text, nothing. It wasn't a mutual decision, it just happened that way. A quiet drift that turned into a clean break. Through mutual friends, I heard she moved back to her parents' place upstate. I don't know if the town is small or if it's one of those peaceful countryside areas people retreat to when life becomes too loud, but it sounded like the kind of place where she could disappear for a while, regroup, try to rebuild something of herself. The baby is due in November. That fact sits in my mind with a strange, detached weight. I don't feel anger when I think about it anymore, not sadness, either. Just a sort of distant acceptance, like remembering a chapter from a book I finished long ago. I hope she finds stability. I hope she becomes the kind of person who can move forward without repeating the mistakes that brought everything down. As for Troy, his story unfolded almost exactly the way Melissa predicted. The paternity test confirmed he was the father. From what I heard, he signed away parental rights almost immediately, then paid her a settlement. Not out of responsibility, more like someone trying to avoid accountability. He was terrified it would impact his future, his art, his career. Maybe it already had. Melissa made sure of that. I wasn't there for the gallery event. I didn't want to be. But I heard the story from someone who knew someone who had been in attendance, and the way it played out was poetic isn't the right word. Fitting, maybe. Honest. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't disrupt anything. She simply stood there, calm and composed, and handed out printed records, photos, messages, timelines, everything showing exactly who Troy had been while he was presenting himself as something else. I can imagine the quiet shock rippling through the room as people read the papers. No yelling, no confrontation, just a steady unraveling of the story he'd tried so hard to control. Investors backed out. Opportunities dissolved. He left for Portland not long after. Maybe he wanted a fresh start, or maybe he was running from the consequences. Either way, the truth followed him long enough to change the trajectory he thought he was entitled to. And me? I didn't crumble the way I feared I might. I didn't stay stuck in that night, replaying Lauren's tears or the sound of her footsteps leaving my hallway. Instead, I started therapy. It wasn't a dramatic decision, just one born of exhaustion. I was tired of feeling like I'd been blindsided, tired of wondering why I didn't see the signs sooner. Therapy didn't give me simple answers. It gave me space to see myself with a little more honesty. I realized I'd ignored a lot of red flags, not because I was naive, but because I was lonely. Not the surface-level kind you fix by surrounding yourself with people, but the deeper kind, where you cling to the illusion of closeness even when it's slipping away. I wanted things to work so badly that I convinced myself they still were, even when the truth was sitting quietly in the corner, waiting for me to acknowledge it. Somewhere in the middle of sorting all that out, Kevin, my friend, who'd been trying to shake sense into me since day one, set me up on a date with his cousin. Normally, I would have resisted. The idea of dating so soon felt reckless. But I said yes anyway, more out of politeness than intention. We met for coffee. I expected awkward small talk, maybe a polite goodbye afterward. Instead, we spent 3 hours talking like we had accidentally stepped into the kind of conversation people search for and rarely find. She asked questions that made me think, laughed easily, listened without judgment. She didn't feel like a distraction. She felt like clarity. She was the one who texted first afterward, a simple message, "I had a really good time. I'd like to do it again." It felt normal, effortless. No tension lurking underneath, no mixed signals. Just openness. And in a way, that simplicity meant more to me than any grand gesture ever could. It reminded me that connection shouldn't feel like chasing someone down a hallway. It should feel like walking alongside them. I don't know where things will go with her. I'm not rushing it. I'm not forcing anything. For the first time in a long while, I'm letting things unfold at their own pace. As for Lauren, I don't hate her. Sometimes I think about the version of her I loved, the one from before. Everything twisted and tangled, and I feel a dull ache, but it fades quickly. Mostly, I don't feel anything. And that, ironically, is what healing looks like. Silence, not emptiness. Distance, not bitterness, just the ability to look at the past without flinching. She made her choices. I made mine. We're both living with the outcomes now. And maybe that's all closure really is, not a conversation, not an apology. But the moment you realize the story has ended and you're finally ready to turn the page. Thank you for listening to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Also, leave a comment below to share your thoughts on what happened. Take care.